All right, guys. Last bits to do here. So I'm going to show you how to do this. I'm going to show you how to finally carry out the ultimate print stuff in here. We're going to look at two last things. If you've still got this Photoshop file open, great. You can work with me. If you don't have it open, don't worry about it because don't worry about it. So at any rate, I'm in Photoshop. Typically, like right now, you'll see in Photoshop, I've got some palettes over here on the side, but I'm missing like my tool palette. I'm just missing things on here. When this happens, come up to the Photoshop menu, come down and do hide others. It gets rid of all the other applications. Every now and then some of the applications, like a Safari window or something will be covering some of this part up. If you, again, simply go up here down to hide others, then it will get rid of that stuff for you and you can actually work with this now. A couple of shortcuts that I do use here in Photoshop. If you double click the hand really fast, it will take your image back to the biggest that it can be and actually still show it to you top to bottom on your screen. I'm going to get rid of this image that's underneath because I don't want you guys to get any more confused on it than we already are. All right, so this is my final image. I do have my sharpening layer right here. I would actually probably double click on this and name it sharpening, S-H-A-R-P-E-N-I-N-G, and say OK. So the first thing that we need to do is actually size this image to fit on the piece of paper that you guys are doing. For your prints next week, you're welcome to use 8.5 by 11 or larger. If you want to go larger, you're welcome to. I don't really care. Don't come in with really baby prints unless there's something absolutely compelling about your work that said, well, come on, Versa, look at this. Of course it had to be on something the size of a postage stamp. It's the nature of the imagery, right? And if you can make that argument to me, I will support you. But if not, we actually need to resize this. To resize your image, come up to the image menu, menu item, and come down to image size. And a dialog box will open up, and it will actually give you the readout of the size of your image. Now, in my case, this is not too different than the other dialog box that we were looking at when we created a new file. You actually have a drop-down menu here that lists different increments of length. So you can do this in pixels or in centimeters or millimeters, but I'm going to do mine in inches. You'll also notice that there's this thing right here is supposed to be a chain link, and the chain link right here between width and height keeps this image proportionate so that if I change the width, it will automatically calculate how tall this image should be, or vice versa. If I change the width, the height of this, it will automatically change this image up here. This image currently right now is basically a 12 by 18 at 300 pixels per inch. If I change this right now, I'm going to change the height so that it reads 10 inches because I want to print this on an 8 by 10 piece of paper. You'll actually see that it's changed it. It's now going to be 10 inches tall and 6 inches wide. However, the number of pixels is not changing in this. This is still got a resolution of 300 pixels per inch. We will talk about resolution a lot later on. You will also see that this file is actually changing a great deal in size. It was 60 megabits large, 60.2. It's now going to be a 17.2. And the reason this is changing is I'm actually downsampling this. Originally, I started out. I'm gonna reset this and go back and do this one more time. I'm actually going to, again, image size. With this setup the way it is right now, see this little checkbox right here that says resample? What that is actually saying it wants me to do is it wants me to keep 300 pixels per inch no matter what size my image is, no matter how big or small it is. So to see what's really going on here, check this part out. I have got an image right now that, let's just say it's 12 inches wide. I'm actually just going to put in a 12 so we deal with an easier number right here. Okay, it's 12 inches wide. So at 300 pixels per inch, I've got 12 here. This is going to be how wide my image is here. So this is 12 inches wide and it's 18 inches tall. Can somebody whip out their calculator again really quick? What I want you to do is multiply 300 times 12.
3,600.
3,600. And then 18 times 300 as well.
5,400.
5,400. Okay. So right now, guys, I have got, this is pixel count. This is now my pixel dimensions. It's now, I've got 3,600 pixels wide, and it makes sense. I've got 12 inches. There's 300 pixels in every single inch. 300 times 12 is 3,600. If I change this number, though, if I change that 12 to like 6, I'm only going to do 6 inches wide. My pixel count changes as well. So if I've got, I'm going to resample this guy now. I've now got a smaller file. This is now 6 inches by 9 inches. And 6 times 300 is 1,800. Is that right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And 9 times 300 is 2,700. Because I said this checkbox right here, I said I want you to resample this. I want you to keep the 300, but I'm going to change my width and height. It actually changes the number of pixels. And when I do that, my file actually gets smaller because I'm throwing pixel stuff away. This has got half the number of pixels that this guy has. Does that make sense?
Yes.
If, on the other hand, I want to keep it, I don't want to change the size of my image, and I really don't want to change the pixel count. I'll end up changing the resolution of this image. If you uncheck this box, what ends up happening is this. Again, I'm going to change this back again to that 6. Now what you end up seeing happens is this. It changed the resolution. I'm saying, I only want 6 inches wide by 9 inches tall, and it says, well, okay, I'm going to keep the exact same number of pixels, but I'm going to change the count for you. So now I've got 624 per inch. Again, if you multiply 600 times 624, that should actually be round down. You'll actually get this image right here at 3,600 pixels by, this stays the same, the 5,400. Does that make sense, what's going on here? So that's just the difference. My feeling about it is this. No matter what size you print your image, you should be, for an inkjet printer, pretty much the standard is you want your image to be 300 pixels per inch no matter what size. Does that make sense? So in our case right here, if I wanted to print a 6 by 9, I actually don't need to have an image that is this big. I could actually click on that resample button right here, the checkbox, and I could change this to 300, and you'll see my image gets way smaller. And the advantage of a smaller image is it prints faster, it's less for you to have to hassle. To be perfectly honest with you, I usually do not do this. I usually would print this at the 624 pixels per inch. I would keep the really high pixel count. The problem that you run into if you change this is if you change these numbers and save your file, you actually change that really big old beautiful file that you had to something really small, which is a nightmare. Yes?
For this, we're not choosing the paper size, right? This is the image size.
This is the image size, but that has to do with the paper size because you need the image to fit on the piece of paper, right? So you can't have a 12 by 18 inch image and put it on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. So this is where we are making those changes. So the way I would typically go about this, I'm going to cancel this out again. Typically, I would come up into my image, down to image size. I would uncheck this resample, and you'll see now all 3 of these are chain linked together. And I would change the height of this to, again, if I'm going to do it on 8.5 by 11, I'm going to change this to a height of 10 and say OK. Does this make sense? And the only thing now, you'll see the image, nothing shifted. It's just changing the actual, I'm saying, I want you to jam more pixels into an inch, which makes the image effectively smaller. Make sense? Okay. So then this is the tricky part, guys. And it's you got to go through this, and it's just how it is. But the printing is, anyway, the printing in Photoshop is amazing. So here we go. Up to the File menu, down to Print. And a dialog box will open up. And this is the printer dialog box. Now, in my case, I do not have a P800 attached to, I haven't ever loaded the driver onto my computer. So the first thing that you need to do is actually pick the printer that you are going to use. Now, all the ones out there have got the drivers loaded on them, but it's this drop-down menu, and you pick the printer. These are all printers that I work on in various different places. In my house, for the fine art printing that I do, I use an Epson Stylus 2880. So I'm going to pick that one for you. The rest of these dialog boxes are going to look exactly the same, so don't worry about that part. You'll see right now that this is a horizontal piece of paper right now, and it's an 8.5 by 11, but it's a horizontal piece of paper. It's these two layout buttons right here that tell you whether it's horizontal or vertical. The one closest to you right here is vertical. The one over here is horizontal. So I want this to be vertical print because it is a vertical print. You cannot get true borderless printing on a lot of these printers. So the trick to it is to understand this. When a piece of paper goes through that printer, it needs to have a border on the top and the bottom in order to actually feed the paper through where the heads can't hit it. So this is not the place or the way to do borderless printing. If you want to get into borderless printing, I will help you do that. Most people do it on a larger roll and then cut their prints down so that they're borderless. There are other tricks that you can use, but suffice it to say, don't try to go borderless on this trip, okay? Just, if you're gonna use an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, make it a 10-inch print, a 6 by 10 or a 7 by 10, and you'll be fine. We good on that? Okay, there's a huge number of settings that we need to set in this, and it starts with this. So I'm only gonna do one copy. I have got this now set up correctly. Sometimes this will come up with a completely different print size. To get to the printer settings, you click on this print setting dialog box. When you click on this, this will come up, and you guys, this should be familiar to most of you. You should have seen this on some level before. For you Canon users, it is just going to look a little bit different, but for the most part, most of this stuff ends up being the same. Anyway, again, you pick your printer from this drop-down menu. You need to make sure you're using the correct printer. Don't worry about these settings right here. Nobody uses these presets because they always get screwed up. You are only going to do one copy. Then here in paper size, click this drop-down menu, and you've got a whole series of papers that you can pick here. For the one that we're going to do, it's US letter. This is 8.5 by 11. If you hold it over here, you'll actually see it tells you what's going to happen to the paper. It's 8.5 by 11. You need a top margin of a 0.12 inch, a bottom of 0.12 inch, a left and right. It tells you what you're going to actually need when you pick this guy. So again, you would come out here and pick US letter. So that part works out right. However, there's other things we need to set up in here. Layout by default is the first of these options. You do not need to worry about the layout right now. This is how you would control the printing for a book or a magazine if you wanted to emulate that. We're not doing that right now. Click on this drop-down menu. Color matching is the first thing you could change. However, color matching is going to be, we are going to have Photoshop control this, so you do not need to change anything in here right now. Paper handling, we've already done. Cover page, there isn't going to be one. Print settings is the biggie. This is the one you need to pick right here. So even though we picked print settings here, you come to this print settings right here. Again, the paper size that you selected will be here already by default, but this is the $1 million baby right here. You have got to pick the media type that you are using. This is where if you're using premium photo paper glossy, you would pick it. If you're using ultra premium paper luster, you would pick this here. If you're doing this on plain paper, I'm gonna be pissed off. At any rate, you pick your medium here. You've got to pick the medium here. There's a second place we're going to have to pick this. But I'm just going to say, I'm going to do this on the Ultra Premium Photo Paper Luster. Is that what they've suggested you guys print on here? Yeah. Okay, so we'll do that. I'm going to print this. If you had a printer that had matte ink loaded, you would not see these. You would only see the matte ink possibilities here. I don't have any matte showing up on here because this has been loaded for a photo black ink. It understands with your computer is connected to your printer says, hey, I'm loaded with matte ink. And if that's the case, your only options here, you don't get this. Your only options here would be matte paper options. But because this was the last setup using a black ink, then I actually have these options here. So if that's the case, you realize that your printer is set up incorrectly. You need to change it to be a photo ink, not a matte ink. Okay, finally, you'll see color is grayed out here. That's fine because you don't want this to actually control your color. In terms of this setting right here, fine or photo fine or super fine right here, I would simply leave this at its default super fine. You're fine on this part. I do pick high speed. There used to be a reason that you wouldn't pick high speed. Everybody uses high speed now. Basically, in the old version of it, what would happen is the print heads go in both directions. And in the old days, the precision of the machines wasn't so good that you would get the exact same spot if the head moved in one direction as in the other direction, so you'd get a misregister. They've eliminated all that now. So now your head will lay down ink going this way, and it'll lay down ink going the other way. Whereas in the old days, if you turned that off, it would lay down ink going this direction, and then it would slide back with no ink and then do it again, and your print would take twice as long. Don't worry, mirror image is just a way to flip your image. You would never want to do that. And in this case, then hit the save button. We're almost done, and it's going to say right here, it starts giving you all of these warnings about color sync matching may produce different results in the printer, blah, 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 blah. Just say okay to this. Don't forget what's going on here. And what it's warning you about is this, is that you are saying now that I'm just going down the line here. So I've done my printer, I've done my settings, I've got my orientation is correct. Now in color management, you definitely want to change this color handling from printer manages color to Photoshop manages the color. This is really critical. Then the next thing down is your printer profile. We're actually going to probably do custom profiles in this class. But for the time being right now, you'll have to use the canned ones that exist. They'll actually be on these machines. They get loaded when you actually load the print drivers on here. But when you click this drop-down menu, you should be able to find your Epson printer. It'll be the P800, and you need to find the type of paper that you're using. In my case, I'm actually on this Epson 2880. So I picked the Epson 2880, and I'm actually using the Ultra Premium Presentation. No, I'm not. I'm doing, what was I doing? I'm using Ultra Premium Luster, so it's going to be this guy right here, although I don't seem to have an Ultra one in here. Old driver, what can I tell you? But nonetheless, you would pick this guy here, right? Does this make sense? This is critical. You have got to pick that Photoshop does it, and then you need to pick the profile. Profiles are made for two things. They are made for a printer, a specific printer, and a specific piece of paper. So if you want to use Hahnemühle paper in an Epson printer, you have got to build your own profile for that. For the time being right now, you're using Epson paper in an Epson printer. The CAN drivers will work fine. For the people who are doing Canon stuff, I can show you how to generate a custom profile for your Canon printer that lets you use Epson paper if you want. The flip side is if you want to use Canon paper and an Epson printer, I can show you. We can do all of that, but that's later on in the game. For the time being right now, you've got to use a profile that exists, and they're going to be the canned ones. So Epson paper and an Epson printer. Okay? I promise you Canon, because I know there's some Canon people in here. I promise I will get you set up so that you can do all of this custom work at home on your own printers, and you'll be fine. But for the assignment for next week, use the printers in here. We good on this? Okay, finally, there's a couple things down here that you can check. It doesn't really matter. The preview right down here will show you. If you click on this match colors, it just changes your color to show you what it's going to look like on your printer. And you'll see as you turn this thing on and off, you see that match color on and off, you see that my print actually gets flatter. Well, that's because I'm going from a screen image, which is what this is, to a print emulation. This is trying to show me what it's going to look like on my printer. And we already know that when you print this stuff out, you're going to lose saturation and contrast both. But nonetheless, that's what this is. The show paper white actually tries to emulate the white of your paper. You just told Epson, you told Photoshop what paper you're using when you picked this profile right here. So are we good on this? Then the last thing, normal printing. As far as rendering intents go, there's two to use, and there's only two to use for photography, relative colorimetric or perceptual. If you have highly saturated imagery, pick perceptual. If you have typical normal imagery, pick relative colorimetric. I'm just telling you that right now because nobody in this room wants me to whip open another color lecture and show you that difference right now. Do you? See, I love you guys. But before the end of this class, I am going to open that fucker up because it's not my place to tell you what to do. It is your place to decide for yourself. Am I right? And to know why you're doing it, right? Okay, so finally, this thing is all set up correctly. You also do want to enable black point compensation. All that really does is it takes the black point of your image and it matches it to black ink. So it tends to make the translation from black on your screen to the blackest on your screen becomes the blackest you can get on your printer. It does that for you, and it's actually an advantage. So nobody unchecks this. Everybody leaves it always checked on. And then you simply hit the print button. Are there questions? Are we good? Okay, I did record that last part. You will see all of that part on there. The only part that's really going to change when you look at this is, again, this printer will be a P800 instead of my R2880. And when you pick these color profiles right here, I don't know how they're actually listed. Usually Epson does this something before this, but you'll see down here, this is for the 3880s. If I was doing a 3880, you have these guys down here. This is the 3900s, or the 4900s. It's probably going to say Epson Stylus P800 or something. You guys will see it. If you have any issue at all, the people at the desk can certainly help you find that part. But you're not going to have a problem with this. Okay, are there questions about this? Cool. All right. So anybody who wants, so next week, and check, I don't think there's any other assignment. I think it's just 5 prints, right? Does anybody know?
Yeah, I think that's it.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's what's going to happen for next week. And I'll see you guys next week.
Thank you.
If you want to print, you got 20 minutes. It's enough time to actually get a print through.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah.